with me. Yeah, New Yorker.
It's a thought that you have in a taxi cab. Anywho, I bought Spider-Man 2 on launch. I've had this game for 2 months now, and then I didn't touch it, and then I binged it for 3 days and I got the platinum trophy. What can I say? I am but a girl who loves a game. My overall thoughts. Great gowns, beautiful gowns. Just kidding. No, this game is very good. I think the writing is quite strong. We'll dive into the plot and I'll get into what I loved and what I didn't, because there's a fair amount of both. I like a lot and there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, we maybe could have refined that choice. And it's beautiful. Like graphically, this game is really stunning. And I thought like the previous two Spider-Man games were also gorgeous and stunning, but looking at videos of them, I'm like, ooh, wow, I thought those games were wonderful and flawless, but comparatively, this game is just like picture perfect. Like I didn't have any performance drops. The game did crash on me more than once, and there was a couple of like little glitches. Obviously, we're talking about Spider-Man 2 today. It's an action-adventure open-world game where you are swinging around the city of New York. It takes place after the first Spider-Man game, which follows Peter Parker, and then the sequel game, Spider-Man Miles Morales, unsurprisingly follows Miles Morales. The main campaign is so good, but so much of the story, especially in the opening hours of the game, it's just set up and kind of clumsily executed exposition. It felt at times like they were using this game to establish a big, not cinematic, like a video game universe, and that they could do a bunch of spin-offs and a bunch of sequels. Like it felt like they were really expanding the universe, whereas the previous two games I was like, okay, I'm seeing teases as to what the future holds, but this one is like, we will not resolve a plot thread, we will introduce a lot of stuff, we're setting a lot of things up, and we're gonna knock them down in 3 to 5 years when we make a follow-up title. The issue of all of this forced exposition at the beginning is that it's clunky, but they're doing it in order to establish all of the map objectives to make the big New York City that they've faithfully recreated worth being in. So I understand why they would want to do it, but also a lot of them have plot lines attached that don't go anywhere. So it was a little annoying to have the first few missions of the game be character interactions being like, we dotted all of X around the city in order for you to do for us. I was like, okay, can we move on? What's the plot actually about? Because I know it's not about these little research stations and piloting a bee drone. It was just hard to know what to focus on, and there's a lot of switching back and forth between Miles and Peter, which was tricky. In the beginning, it felt like they were doing a lot of work to try and justify having both characters be in this game and making this title a two-hander. It's almost like they want to justify having both characters in the game because they've already developed 2 separate systems for both of them, and they don't want to give up what they've already worked on. That's how I felt at the beginning, but throughout the story, the writing becomes clearer. So I'm like, okay, I'm more on board with the choices that are being made here. They do strike a decent balance once all of the pieces are set, but at the beginning, I was quite concerned that this was going to be a Peter story and Miles was going to be just tacked onto it thoughtlessly. I think Miles has enough to do. I think his circle of people don't. Spider-Man 2 picks up sometime after the Miles Morales interquel game. Peter Parker and Miles are co-parenting New York as the Spider-Man. Aunt May has died. Peter has moved into the house and taken over the mortgage. Being Spider-Man does not pay the overdue bills, so Peter gets a job teaching at Miles' school and loses it on the first day because Sandman becomes a giant sand monster. This fight doesn't mean much for the game. I think it's just to open things with a giant action set piece, which is a wild spot to do your tutorial / like controls reminder for the player. The stakes just felt really high, and I was like, oh my gosh, no, I'm not doing well. New York is gonna die. Tiffany's gonna die. Beyonce. The emotional core of Peter's storyline is about struggling with domesticity and how being a hero doesn't align with leading a traditional life, which Peter wants to have, but he can't hold a steady job. It puts a lot of strain on his relationships, romantic and otherwise, because he's constantly having to duck out of things and save lives. So he struggles with that balance, which is a major theme of the game. There's a flashback with Aunt May when Peter was in high school, and he punches a wall, and he has superpowers at this point, so his dorky little fist smashes the drywall. May comes in and she talks about how she strived to be perfect in everything when she was his age, but she spread herself too thin and ended up being bad at everything. So working towards a manageable balance is much healthier. Peter is with MJ, Mary Jane, his girlfriend. Do I have to explain Spider-Man? I feel like most people watching this are going to know what's happening. They're looking at a photo album and he finds a picture of the hole that he punched into the wall. And there's a little note on it that says balance, and he initially can't remember, and then the flashback happens. And then later, Harry Osborne, his friend who's been missing from the narrative for a long time, we'll get to him. He offers him a job, and Peter initially is like, I don't know whether or not to accept it. And then Harry's like, balance, right? Which like subtly strikes a chord with Peter, I think. And that leads him to accept the job. Also, can we talk about the Peter Parker facelift? I know that this is old news, and I know that they did it to better match his voice actor Yuri Lowenthal's face, but it is like a little bit jarring that they recast him. Also, Peter has a villain arc in this game, and Lowenthal is literally just doing Sasuke. Like, there are some parts where I'm like, oh my gosh, if I close my eyes, he still sounds the same. Like, he still sounds like Sasuke from 2003. Mary Jane Watson is Peter's girlfriend. She's a reporter for the Daily Bugle, which is run by alt-right influencer James Jonah Jameson. I identify with MJ. She hates her job. Her side hustle isn't killing it. She writes a book about a fictional country called Simcaria. We don't need to go there. The book did not chart. Anyways, like and subscribe. Engaging with the content is the best way to help the channel grow. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Please, I would love to be monetized. Thank you. She feels pressure to stay at her job because of, bills, and there's a promotion on the line that she really wants. But Triple J hates her, so it's even worse. MJ is going through it, and I feel her. As someone who just quit their job, I get it. I feel seen. Harry Osborne is alive. He was high school besties with Peter and has been in a test tube for a couple years trying to cure a vague illness that is seriously encumbering his ability to live. He literally fell off the face of the earth and then suddenly reappears outside of Peter's house. No call, no text, no notice. Bus, another plane, no sleep. Nobody believed in me. He's perfectly healthy, and MJ and Peter are shocked to see him. And for anybody who didn't play either of the previous games, but for some reason you're watching this, thank you for being here. We, the audience, have seen Harry in the green test tube covered in black ooze webs twice, because they do it in both games. So this was major because he just shows up like it's normal. I was anticipating that when he was going to be folded into the narrative, it would be like he's already in full villain mode, but that is not the case. Harry is really nostalgic. I think he's trying to reclaim his childhood to an extent. And I do have to compliment the writing here because I do think they do a successful job of portraying him as really socially awkward and quite immature at times, which tracks because he's been in a test tube for a very, very long time. Like, it makes sense that he's a little behind his peers. He and Peter go on a bike ride to catch up, and the game will make sure to reuse the bikes in 2 other side quests because they programmed it and they will use it even if it's not that fun. They go to their high school. Keep in mind, both of these men are 25 and they break into the school. I was like, oh, this is inappropriate. They do get caught by a security guard, and it is in service of a flashback from when they were actually in high school, but I think you can do the flashback while they stand across the street. I don't understand why I, as 25-year-old Peter Parker, need to play basketball in a school gymnasium, inside of the school, during the school year. Didn't sit right with me. I get that it was to serve a literary function by splicing it with a flashback. It was inappropriate. The whole time I was like, please leave. Harry later reveals that he has an exoskeleton suit keeping him alive, which is the black goo from the tube, which is Venom. The plot beats serve to develop the exosuit from like a mindless tendril symbiote into the supervillain. The Venom stuff and the way that it impacts our cast is really, really good. It's why the game is worth playing. Venom is our endgame third act villain, and our main antagonist leading up to that is Kraven the Hunter. He is, I guess, like, incredibly wealthy. Like, he does a New York takeover in what feels like no time. He has amassed an army of hunters from all over the world, and he has infinite access to technology and weapons and vehicles and information. And he's also extremely physically strong. Like, he doesn't have superpowers. His superpower is being unbothered, because if someone has a gun, he can just like grab the gun and be like, no, you're not going to shoot that. Plot armor serves Kraven very, very well. The game does not do a good job of establishing him or his group or what they're doing in New York. Like, I know his personal motivation because the game tells us. But I don't understand how he got from the decision to like use New York as a hunting ground to getting to New York with an army having acquired real estate. Like he must have worked with an incredible real estate agent in order to get a mansion. Do you know how hard it is these days to find a mansion with a pre-built labyrinthine dungeon underneath to trap all the people that you don't like? HGTV was working triple time in order to give him his dream home. I love that this is where I suspend my disbelief. I'm like, how did he find a mansion like that? Outside of the city? In New York? Like someone had to build that. I think if he had been teased in previous games, or if it had been established that he already had a presence in New York, but he was just elsewhere doing his own thing, I'd be like, honestly, sure, totally, I'm with you. But the game shows us his decision to go to New York and pursue a bunch of supervillains after the Sandman stuff at the beginning. So the way it's presented is day one, Peter goes to work as a teacher. He loses the job. On that same day, Kraven has decided a New York takeover, and by the next day, Peter is being offered a job by Harry, and Kraven is in New York taking over with his whole army. The timeline isn't timelining. I also think Kraven is the worst villain that we've had so far because he lacks a distinct personal connection to anyone involved in the story. Like, he is truly an outsider, which initially I was excited for because he's presented in a jungle and has this natural aesthetic, which could have served as like a nice visual juxtaposition with how technology focused the Spider-Man aesthetic of the previous two games have been. I was like, okay, cool. They haven't had a villain like this. He's going to be a personal vigilante going around New York and doing his hunt. In the first game, Dr. Octavius is Peter's employer, but also his mentor. Like, they have a personal connection. And Martin Lee works with his aunt for a non-profit homeless shelter. So it's people that he's connected to. And then in the Miles game, it's his uncle Aaron, who is the Prowler, and his friend from school, Finn, who is the Tinkerer. So there's more of a betrayal when it turns out that they are villains. Kraven gets to the city while Scorpion and Martin Lee, who is also known as Mr. Negative, but we'll call him Martin, they're being moved to another prison for reasons, and he captures them. And it's unclear initially why he's hunting New York villains. He does end up killing Scorpion a little bit later for the fun of it, and he keeps Martin in his McMansion basement dungeon gladiator arena. Meanwhile, Peter is solving crime and whatnot, and Harry offers him a job at the Emily May Foundation, named after Harry's mom, Emily Osborne, and Peter's Aunt May, with the intention of healing the world. That's important. Novel highlight those words. It'll be on the exam. And like, honestly, I just like agree. Like, it's so important to have a mega wealthy friend who can just offer you a job that suits your schedule at the drop of a hat. Dr. Curtis Connors works for the EMF, and he used to be a supervillain lizard guy. He's now reformed. He's a human again, and he's been treating Harry. He's the person who gave Harry the symbiote suit that has healed him. This is where the game starts exploring the status quo inversion of heroes and villains, because a lot of the villains that we see in this game are reformed and they're just trying to live normal, better lives. Tombstone appears later in this game and he makes a joke about being out of shape because he's not a villain anymore. A lot of these people are portrayed in sympathetic lights. Tombstone and Mysterio are both working at the Coney Island amusement park. Sandman is humanized once we realize the hunters were after him and his daughter, and that's why he freaked out and became a giant. Black Cat gets a magic wand and disappears to France to be with her girlfriend. And then Miles gets the portal making wand and it disintegrates as soon as it touches his hand. I don't know what they were going for with this one. Maybe it's like a multiverse tease because they quickly do like a couple of portal shifts to random locations. Like there's one in the Arctic that was like really trippy and cool. But I was like, where did she get this magic wand from? And also, she goes to France and we never talk about her again. And she's bisexual. Bring her back. Like I kind of mentioned, Miles doesn't have a ton to do in this game until later when he is repeatedly saving Peter's life. His like personal plot centers on him writing his personal essay for college admissions. Americans in the chat, sound off. Is that hard? It's not common in Canada to have to write personal essays. You do have to for like some programs. But in general, it's mostly just like your grades and then they let you in. So I'm just curious. He's trying to get into a music production program. His mom, Rio, is around. She's being a councilwoman because she is a woman in politics. His friends, Genki and Haley, are also there. Genki is the hacker guy in the chair with infinite knowledge, and Haley is his artist love interest. He reconnects with his uncle Aaron, who has hung up the moniker of the Prowler. He is in his reformed criminal era. He's just trying to complete his probation. His plotline ends with Rio co-signing an apartment above her and Miles's so that he can be closer with his family. That's Miles's like personal plotline. As a hero, he is very upset that Martin has escaped because Martin killed his father in the first game. The narrative is like, Miles might take revenge. He has the vibes of a killer, but we'll wait and see, because he let Martin drown during the whole boat Kraven capture moment. Martin started drowning and Miles just like kind of stood there. I'm sat and was like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But the game really lets you think that Miles is on a revenge quest. Miles's other side quest focus is the Mysterio plotline, which involves some combat challenges and Mysterio VR experiences. The final fight with Mysterio is really, really cool. Part of it is in New York, but it's upside down. It's just visually very impressive. You also learn that Mysterio is being scammed by these two ladies because they're doing a credit card fraud scheme with the VR booths, and they know that Mysterio will take the fall because he's a former convict. So Miles manages to prevent Mysterio from getting arrested, which also adds to this redemption theme. Mysterio at the end of it doesn't like claim to be a good guy, but he does have a dramatic line about like, heroes and villains are heroes and villains, but things get messy when you get behind the mask. I was like, okay, Reddit philosopher. The game did crash on me during the Mysterio fight, which was upsetting because it is so visually impressive. But then when I rebooted the game, it just continued after the fight. So I don't know if I missed content. Peter, Miles, and Harry are trying to figure out what's going on with the hunters because obviously their goal is a little unclear. They seem to just be like randomly terrorizing New York because they're capturing the villains alive. So it's not actually a hunt. Like, they're not killing them. At Coney Island, the hunters try to capture Tombstone, but Peter and Harry step in to save the park. Harry uses the symbiote and reveals that he actually has powers. On a later mission, Harry uses the symbiote to construct a black Spider-Man-esque suit, but it's a little bit bulkier. After the mission is done, the symbiote changes slightly to mimic Spider-Man, like the mask changes and a white spider logo now emblazons the chest. So the symbiote, like Harry, has a bit of an affinity for Peter. Eventually, Dr. Connors is captured by Kraven because this is part of the villain scheme, so they go to rescue him because he's an integral part to Harry's treatment. MJ here has one of a few playable segments where her job is be stealth and use taser. They reach Connors and they're about to rescue him, but then Kraven injects him with lizard serum so he becomes a lizard monster again, and then Peter gets fatally stabbed. The game really had me for a second here because I was like, he's gonna die. Are they gonna do it? Are they really going to do it? I'd be really impressed if they did it. It had me for a second. It was a good fake out. They did a good job. The symbiote suit, again, that is protecting Harry's life, comes off of him and it wraps up Peter and he wakes up and he becomes like a little bit monstrous, but it stops the big stab wound in his abdomen from hurting him. So it does save his life. This is the beginning of Peter's villain arc, which I love. The monster gets in his head a little bit and he starts being kind of an asshole. Kraven gets his jollies off a little bit here, but we'll get into why later. After Peter defeats a bunch of the hunters, we get back to the EMF and he doesn't know how to take the suit off. It doesn't seem to want to latch back onto Harry, which is obviously a problem because Harry has a critical illness. But then the suit also just like spits out the blade that was stuck in Peter, so at least we know that Peter's gonna be fine. He starts wearing the suit all the time. He won't take it off. He's making like snide comments about how he has to do everything by himself. But what really got me, and it's a very subtle progression, the game handles it delicately and beautifully, which is nuts. It's nuts that the Venom stuff is so good and the Hunter stuff is so stupid because Venom has so much nuance. And they're really willing to drip feed you just little by little. It was so thrilling. When Peter refers to himself and the suit as we, when I tell you I had to put my controller down and take a little lap, Peter tracks down the lizard. They have a big fight. He manages to inject an antidote into Dr. Connors, which is great because now he can help get the suit back to Harry, but he seems resistant to helping. Dr. Connors does not really like the suit. We're in a lab in the sewers and we see the meteorite that brought the symbiote to Earth. Eventually, Peter goes home and he falls asleep. Mind you, he's supposed to be spending time with MJ, proofreading an article for her, and also he promised to get back the suit to his bestie who's literally dying. And while he's asleep, he enters like a fugue state and the suit takes over and he starts just destroying the neighborhood, and hunters are outside following him and he starts obliterating the hunters. They make it to this underpass bridge and he's just being so disruptive, and MJ is chasing behind him. At a certain point, Miles catches up and he holds off the hunter, and MJ runs after Peter, who is like in the scary dark bridge at this point. And she has like a pick me girl, like, I'm the only one who can talk to him when he's like this. You're not you. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me in the eye. You're not you. It's not like that. Like, it is legitimate, but it was just funny in the moment to me because I was like, oh my God, Peter. That's not how she talks. Peter almost kills her and she gets away. The game is really leaning into some horror stuff. I was afraid, but in like a hot way. Peter wakes up the next morning on a city bench in all black. Fabulous costume design. He only wears flannel and white tees, so to see him in all black is actually jarring. Like, it is genuinely a major shift. He's ignoring calls. Rio gets pissed because Miles has gone missing after the bridge incident. Kraven has captured him. I'm also glad that they portrayed Rio with a little bit of bite because she's like the perfect mom with fabulous boundaries all the time. So I do think it's like natural for her to lose her composure a little bit. Deep down in her soul, she does not like Peter. And I kind of live for that. Peter is not being a nice person. He goes to Harry's and he yells at Harry and MJ because they're like, the suit is changing you a little bit. You have to agree. He gets mad at MJ for running a story that paints him like a monster, and he basically tells Harry to have fun dying. And then in the other room, Norman tells Peter that he's always been like a son to him, and he hugs him, and then he like is apathetic to that and he's like, gotta go, and he swings away. And Harry is so mad that he smashes a window with his cane, because he can barely walk. And yet Peter's like, I need the suit because it'll help me save New York. So we're learning that the Venom suit plays on someone's personal desire and it twists it a little bit so that it can enact violence and eventually take over the world. Miles escapes the mansion underground laser prison, and he doesn't actually escape for real. He enters like a Roman Colosseum style arena where Kraven and the hunters watch people fight to the death for entertainment. He fights Martin, which narratively, I don't like Kraven very much. I think he's poorly executed as a character and as like a concept, but his inclusion does set up for very engaging scenarios. This fight in the arena with Martin is so good because obviously Miles has a bone to pick with him. At the end of the fight, Miles is like, I'm better than you. I'm not going to kill you, and I'm giving you a chance. And he throws Martin out of a rooftop window and is like, get help. I'll be here. So this is where Miles starts to like really process the feelings of his dad's passing. Previously in the game, you can tell that he's still holding on to it because his mom has started dating someone new, and Miles is a little resistant to meeting him. And if there's spider business when they're supposed to hang out, Miles is like, I'm happy to leave. Peter finds Martin and then goes to save Miles. This is Peter's big fight with Kraven, who has learned that certain sound frequencies mess with the symbiote, so he has a huge bell to throw Peter off his game. Peter loses control and almost kills Kraven, and then Miles intervenes. Miles has a standoff with Peter after Kraven is like out of commission here. And then Miles has a moment with Peter where he's the pick-me girl and he's like, Peter, this isn't you. And then Miles beats the shit out of him. And then he wears Peter down enough physically and emotionally to where Peter is able to like rip the suit off himself, and he's back to being like a normal person, and they contain the suit in a little airtight container. Peter intends to bring the symbiote back to Dr. Connors, but Harry is at the lab and he gets mad at Peter. So he shatters the containment device and then absorbs the symbiote again. But at this point, the creature has fully developed into Venom. Like, it's not Harry with the illusion that he's in control, but it's the monster in control. No, we're full Marvel supervillain Venom. He has name dropped himself. He is Venom. Harry loses control. He tears through Oscorp. Of course, the hunters are omnipotent and they're always around. So there's a bunch of hunters outside of Oscorp as well, like literally waiting for Harry. And he goes out there and he kills Kraven, and Kraven is so happy to be dead. Kraven's whole deal is that he has cancer and it's terminal. He doesn't want to succumb to the illness. So his takeover of New York isn't to hunt powerful people. It's to find a worthy adversary who will kill him in combat in a way that is satisfying to him, because he wants to die in battle, not to the illness. That's why he's like artificially inducing all of these circumstances. It's to try and make all these people more powerful so that one of them will kill him, because he as a human is too strong to get taken out by supernatural beings. Harry and Kraven have interesting parallels in their story when it comes to pursuing power. Harry is kind of at the inception of it. Kraven is more so at the end of what that journey can look like. I think Kraven's personal circumstances inform what's going on with Harry, because it's not necessarily just about like being healthy or being healthy enough to be alive. Harry does also want to be strong. Not necessarily Venom strong, but you can see him like falling in love with the power fantasy of being a hero during that earlier mission when he uses the suit for the first couple times, especially because he gets to do it with his bestie for life, soulmate, Peter Parker. The next day, MJ is back at the house and Peter gets on a FaceTime with her and tells her to stay away from Harry at all costs. And Harry is literally at the door. And then all you see on the FaceTime screen is a bunch of black tendrils like float over her face before the call gets cut. A bunch of civilians are turning into like weaker Venoms. They're turning into symbiote creatures. So by the time Peter gets back to the house, Harry is just standing there with MJ and then turns her in front of his eyes into like a fierce drag Venom named Scream. This was so cool. I was so happy. I was like, wow, I'm so glad that they gave MJ something to do a little bit more than being informant girl with fake gun. This moment is so iconic. Like, this is a really good fight. I appreciated her rage at like having to pay Peter's mortgage for him because he can't hold a job because he's not a normal girl, and how she despises like being sidelined by her boyfriend. Like, she's not a priority, and she's constantly venting about her book underperforming, and she hates her job, but she has to work it in order to pay for their life together. Obviously, Peter gets the symbiote off and they apologize and kiss and whatever, but I'm glad she got her feelings out. At around this point in the game, I did hear an NPC singing Hamilton in the background when swinging through Broadway, and I laughed. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this penny pace from day to day. For a native New Yorker. Whoa. Wendy Williams really did that. And she did it for the culture. Venom is now taking over the city. Big, like, networks of tendrils are growing everywhere. We're not full dystopian yet, but it is getting a little bit scary. It is very Stranger Things upside down if Stranger Things was good. Venom does a similar thing to what he did to Peter, where he's in Harry's head and he's, like, transforming and amplifying his desires, but making them evil. So Harry wanted to heal the world. And Venom wants to do the same thing, except healing the world is colonizing it as a symbiote and taking over everything. And Venom is obsessed with Peter because Harry is obsessed with Peter. Headcanon, headcanon, headcanon. Harry might be a little one of the girls. I ship them, if only a little bit. I'm sure there's an argument to be made as to how queer theory applies to the Harry, Venom, Peter Parker obsession. It kind of plays into that sense of like homoerotic, hypermasculine, big passion. Anyways, the city at this point is now in like a dystopic state. Like, the skies are gray, everyone is turning into a monster, people are fleeing, it's not good. And the symbiotes are all part of a hive mind, so they're really good at organizing themselves. Peter gets dogpiled by some symbiotes at some point. Connor implies earlier in the story that some of Venom is probably still inside of him. So Miles and Martin both go into Peter's psyche, sure, and they find the symbiote core, and they don't destroy it, they invert it so it becomes anti-venom. And now Peter is like a super weapon against the symbiotes. This part lost me a little bit, but they have to find a way to justify why Peter keeps the cool Venom powers so that he doesn't go into the end game feeling like really underpowered. Now we're at the climax. MJ has stolen the meteor from Venom. The meteor is like the central core of like the hive mind Venom colonization project. If they destroy the meteor, they wipe out all of the Venom stuff and everyone is safe. Peter and Miles both have solo standoffs against Venom. Peter fights him in the school gym because that's a nice bookend. And then Harry has like a similar thing where he has a bunch of venting dialogue where he's upset that Peter didn't come visit him ever or seem to like ask about him when he was away for treatment. Again, like, I know they're trying to be like, Venom's evil, but I think MJ and Harry are raising some very real grievances. Like, these characters, I think, have a lot of emotional baggage to unpack outside of the framework of evil villain fight. The fight then gets taken to the Foundation building. Venom grows wings, and for some reason I out loud said wings, And then I laughed at myself because I was like, I don't know why amongst everything that has happened so far in this game, that's egregious to me that Venom has wings. Like what? They go to the Foundation because it has a particle accelerator and they think the accelerator can destroy the meteor, which it does. Miles is able to hold off Venom for long enough while Peter is out of commission a little bit. Destroying the meteor destroys the symbiote presence. Harry dies because like Venom was the only thing keeping him alive. And at this point, like the fusion, the Venn diagram of Harry and Venom is too far gone. Miles uses his electricity powers to defibrillate Harry and he restarts his heart. Harry has a moment of being lucid and Peter like passionately proclaims his love for Harry. Harry does not say anything back. He looks at him blankly and then he falls into a coma. But it was very like Sora, Riku at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2. After this fight wraps, Norman is pissed for some reason. The Spider-Man stopped Venom and saved his kid's life because Norman saw Harry become Venom and destroy his Trump Tower over the security cameras. And Dr. Connors literally said that killing Harry is the only way to stop Venom. So I was pretty confused that Norman was like, what did you do to my son? When New York was literally unlivable a couple hours ago. They stopped an apocalypse and your son is alive. Like, I think this is the best case scenario, but he's furious. I didn't really understand. After destroying the meteor and Venom, I was also questioning why Peter's suit didn't melt off because it was technically also a symbiote, but I guess they just didn't want to go there. Maybe because it interacted with Martin's negative powers and it's anti-venom, it doesn't count. Related to this, we also get the setup for Carnage through one of the many unresolved side plots. Carnage is another Spider-Man supervillain. He's usually an adversary to Venom. He's Venom, but category is red. Throughout this plotline, Peter reconnects with Yuri Watanabe, who is a vigilante former cop who goes by Wraith now. In the first game, Spider-Man was like really in it with the cops. And then in Miles Morales, they really distanced cops from the Spider-Man identity. So it makes sense that they developed her into Wraith off camera and then they reintroduce her into the plot like this. She is hunting a cult of fire-obsessed people who worship the Flame. The leader of the Flame is, of course, a hot, charming white guy. This guy somehow manages to steal a symbiote from a train and it's in a container like Peter's from earlier. This guy has like a whole villain monologue where he's pouring gasoline on Peter while he's stuck underneath a train and he's gonna light him on fire. This game has some crazy moments. Anyways, he claims that he had a vision that like greatness was going to choose him and that greatness was called Carnage. Like he saw that. After this, he disappears. He's not in the game anymore. Yuri is like, I'm gonna keep looking for him. That's an unresolved thread. We'll see what happens in Spider-Man 3 or whatever the next entry does with this character tease. Also, like, does his symbiote get dissolved too because the meteor gets obliterated? I'm sure they'll find a reason to keep it. We'll get to the rest of the character teases in a second, but now that we've completed the main game and the credits have rolled, our characters are largely at peace except for Harry, who is still alive but in a coma. Norman teases a Green Goblin setup. Finally, Peter and MJ are committed to domestic bliss. She has quit her job and become a podcaster, which is oh so relatable. I do resent that she finishes editing her podcast and then like clicks a button in the editing software and the computer randomly has like a pop-up that says published or something along those lines. And then she just like walks away. I'm like, girl, you didn't want to edit that? No playback for quality control? Like you just stood up and went to go have breakfast. You're an editor and a writer. This is not correct. Peter verbally, symbolically passes the torch on to Miles and kind of gives him permission to be New York's only Spider-Man because Miles has been ready for a while. And I mean, like, this game shows Peter kind of fumbling the bag a few times and Miles is the competent one. This felt earned and it was a nice moment because Peter has been Miles's mentor for a while. And now Peter can get to like focus on his life and balance. The mid-credits scene shows Norman visiting Dr. Octopus in prison. They have like a previous relationship where they were business partners and then Norman like screwed him over or whatever. And that's why Dr. Octopus is working in like a shitty lab in the first game. I forgot that I painted my face like this until right now. Norman is at the prison because he knows that Dr. Octopus knows the identities of the Spider-Man and he asks them because obviously he's trying to set up some sort of revenge plot. For what? I don't know. It doesn't It doesn't make sense. The game doesn't justify this part very well. But then Dr. Octopus is like, I'm not telling you. And he's writing something down. And then Norman asks what he's writing. And then like Dr. Octopus breaks the fourth wall and like stares dead into the camera. And he's like, I'm writing the final chapter. And it's like, work, writer's room, self-insert. Go off. This is your game. Like the scene doesn't make any sense. It's just here to like tell the audience that another game is coming, which these games are very successful and they're produced by Sony, who makes the PlayStation. We know there's going to be a Spider-Man 3, you guys. You don't need to tell us. The actual post-credit scene shows Miles getting ready for dinner at home. His mom has started seeing someone, so now she's trying to like actually set up the meeting, and Miles has arrived at a place emotionally where he can handle that. Haley comes over. Her and Miles have become an item. They're like a cute teenage couple. It's very sweet. A guy named Albert Moon comes over and introduces his daughter Cindy, whose face isn't shown. Like we see Albert and his daughter is not standing right next to him. He's by himself. And then he goes, this is my daughter, Cindy. But it's in an over-the-shoulder shot between the two of their heads that faces the front door. And we see Miles, Haley, and Rio. And I was like, that's not normal. For a post-credit scene to not show her face, what's that about? So obviously I looked her up. And she is a hero known as Silk. She's probably not a hero right now, but it's likely that she will become a hero in whatever is coming up for the Spider-Man expanded video game universe. I also kind of glossed over Miles's domestic life because the game kind of glosses over Miles's domestic life. Like he gets good screen time connecting with his mom, but Haley, Genki, and Uncle Aaron are all kind of sidelined, which is wild to say because Aaron has a quest line about his old Prowler days and Haley has a playable side quest. They just don't get a ton of relationship development as a cast. Like Peter is having deep interpersonal problems with MJ and with Harry. Miles is mostly having like internal problems of the self. Everyone in his life seems like pretty okay. Aaron is working on being better and like turning his life around, which is great. We just don't see a lot of it. He has one scene at the beginning of the quest line and then one scene at the very end when he moves in. Haley is like building a community of artists so they can all support each other's work, and she's gaining clout as like a working artist in New York City. Genki is infinitely smart and he can hack the air. He's doing all of their guy in the chair stuff. I do think Miles's personal life serves as a nice breather between Peter's heavier storyline. It's just a shame that it's like not as strong as it could be. It's clear that the Peter trio are the crux of the game and Miles is like around to save Peter from himself. Like Miles is the hero of the story. He's fixing a lot of the issues and he has like the true last fight with Venom. It's secretly a Miles game. They just don't want you to know. Haley's side quest follows her covering up some graffiti art, and it's a very unique quest in how the game reformats itself in order to better portray Haley's experience. Haley is deaf, so the game audio is deeply muffled, and like artsy icons appear to little kind of artsy icons appear that reflect her emotions and show what she's reading in other people emotionally. It shows that she's really reliant on reading other people's faces and using context clues to kind of figure out what's going on in most spaces where people don't know ASL and aren't able to communicate with her as easily, or they're not texting. Maybe she doesn't always want to share her number. She does give her number to the graffiti artist whose art she's covering at the end of the quest line, because Haley is like, I can tell that you're not confident in your work and you're covering it up on purpose and making it bad, but you are good. You just have to like believe. I tried searching to see if this was good representation or not, because obviously I am not the authority. My opinion does not necessarily matter, but it seems to be a resounding yes from most spaces that I've looked at in regards to her content being handled well. I will refer to Damaris Burrell-Vaughan's article for Medium, where she wrote about Haley and the importance of intersectional representation and how surprising and refreshing it was to see in a video game. Anyways, it seems like they're really passing on the torch to Miles, so maybe in the next game, this side of the cast will take center stage. In the post-game, Peter does get a hologram message from Harry that he recorded after losing the suit because he thought he was going to die. He left behind some company assets for Harry so that he can keep doing the EMF Foundation's work, and then he also left a box of things to remember Emily and May by. It's very bittersweet because he was not very good to Harry throughout this game, and now Harry is unconscious. There are 3 more side missions to talk about, and then it's 2 a.m. and the bar's closing. One of the many map objectives are the Hunter's Blinds, which are these rooftop skirmishes with the hunters who are hiding with cloaking tech. After completing these missions, we get pieces of Kraven's backstory through like voice memos. So we learn like where he's from, what's going on with his family. The first few voice messages tease at his family fleeing Volgograd, which I thought was a fake place like Symkaria, but it's a real city in Russia. There's all this turmoil in the family, and this game is really good at teasing things that are going to happen later. So you're like, okay, I guess we're going to find out what happens with his family in the next game. But then in the last voice clip that we hear, it's his daughter, Anna, who is saying that the entire family is dead. And it has the same energy of that meme that's like, I worked on the story for months, and they just tweeted it out. I did this specific mission as Miles, but it's not specific to either of the Spider-Men. Miles and Genki have that energy in response to this. They're like, well, I guess they're all dead. Didn't think that's where this was going to go. But Anna is for sure being established as Kraven's replacement because she is a popular villain in the comic books. I'm sure she'll be folded in. Also related to the hunters, there are these drone missions. The game introduces a gliding mechanic as an alternate option to swinging throughout the city. I personally did not love the gliding, but because they expanded the city over the river, I think it made sense to have something like this because you can't swing webs necessarily across open water. So these missions are like drone chases where you have to follow behind it and stay in the slipstream that it's creating. And then you get data from the drone. And we learned that Kraven was hunting a bunch of like random people, and it kind of didn't make sense because some of them were just like mundane civilians and other people have been dead for years. So it's confusing as to why Kraven would want to hunt them. But then after getting to the end of the quest line, we go to this penthouse apartment that's gorgeous and expensive. I did this part as Peter. Peter goes downstairs and he finds this secret lab, and there's a bunch of like pre-recorded messages in the apartment too. So it's like a trap that's like automated. It's not like someone is watching him over the cameras. Peter goes into the secret layer basement and he learns that it's the Chameleon, which is another Spider-Man supervillain who has technology to change his appearance. That's why Kraven was hunting these like oddball people who didn't seem relevant or have been dead for a really long time. It's because Chameleon has been masquerading as them. Chameleon tries to kill Spider-Man. Spider-Man obviously escapes, and then we see a shot of Chameleon in disguise, and he's been watching Spider-Man, so obviously he's going to be folded into the next game too. Also, reveal, he's Kraven's brother. It's all connected. Kraven had a lot of reasons to be in New York, but they wanted to do map objective dumb exposition at the beginning, but not important plot exposition as to why Kraven is so established in New York randomly. The last thing is collecting spider bots throughout the city. It's exactly what it sounds like. They're little spider robots and they're just around. There's a bunch of them in each district. After you collect all 42 of them, you get a signal ping to go to a random alley. And once you're there, a portal opens up to the bar with no name. And Delilah is the bartender there. This is a direct reference to Across the Spider-Verse, and it's done in the animation style of the movie. And she takes all the spider bots and she's like, tell Miguel it's finders keepers. So we have a Wraith set up for the next game. We have Carnage, we have Silk, we have Anna, we have Chameleon, we have like Dr. Octavius is going to make a comeback. Quentin Beck as Mysterio is going to be back. And now like, are we going to get Across the Spider-Verse? Is that what they're doing? Like, it's the first time the games have directly referenced the animated movies. A video game Peter Parker does make a cameo appearance in Across the Spider-Verse, but now it's canon. Like, they had some movie costumes as fun wearables that you could unlock for the game, but Miguel is going to be in Spider-Man 3, and 18 plus Twitter is waiting with bated breath. Overall, I liked Spider-Man 2. Is it my favorite of the three? No. I love the first one very much. I think it's like a perfect game. This one I just think has shortcomings when it comes to scope. I think it gets a little messy, it gets a little jumbled, but the Venom plotline is like the best work I've seen in a long time. Anywho, yeah, that's all I have to say. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below as to what you think about this game. What are you playing? Should I cover more prestige titles like this? Have you seen Across the Spider-Verse? I didn't catch that movie, but I want to watch it very badly after playing this game. Anyways, please subscribe. I would love to be monetized. Sharing the video also helps. Getting eyes on it, and even just copying the link tricks the algorithm into thinking people are sharing. You can also tip me through buying a thanks on YouTube. I also have a coffee if you feel so inclined. The best way to support my channel is by sharing to help turn this into a more sustainable career. But if you're like, honestly, this was worth $1, that option exists. It is time for me to go. Actually, no, I'm gonna go to New York. I'm gonna swing around the city and I'm gonna stop some crime like a native New Yorker. It's a thought that you have in a taxi cab after ride the subway, talking to people like a native New Yorker. That performance has ruined my brain. Riding the subway, talking to people. She's funny. We're gonna do a little vamping.